All right, so at this point you should have attempted this problem and written an outline for how you would kind of explain your work if this were your AWP. So first I'm going to just go through and look at what you would need, like the steps as far as solving for the maximum volume for this aquarium. And then I'll talk about kind of what I would make sure I wanted to include inside my AWP. So first thing I notice here is I want to make the volume as large as possible. So that's kind of what is driving this whole problem here. So when I'm talking about volume, I have a rectangular prism here, or a box, and I know that the volume of a box is equal to length times width times height. Length times width times height. So that's going to kind of be driving whatever I do here. So when I look at this box, instead of having numbers for the length times the width times the height, I just have these different factors here, or expressions. So one of those is x, one is 5 minus x, and one is 10 minus x. So what I'm going to do then is write my volume equation. Oops. Using these different dimensions. So I could say x is my length times my width, I'm going to say is 10 minus x, times my height, which is 5 minus x. Now, really, it doesn't matter what you say your length, your width, and your height are, because you're just multiplying, and we know we can multiply in any order. Okay, so we have our polynomial here that represents the volume of the aquarium. So what I want to do next then is figure out what I could make x in order for this volume to be as large as possible. So instead of guessing and checking like, well, what if I made x 1 foot or 2 feet or 3 feet? I want to find that exact value of x that gives me my maximum. So in order to do that, we're going to have to use the graphing calculator. So I went into y equals and I just typed in my volume equation that we wrote. And now I want to graph this to try and find that maximum. But I'm going to go to the window because some of these values don't make sense. So when I think of x, x is this length right here. So I cannot have a negative value of x. That would not make any sense. So I got to have something that's positive, and it can't be too big. So what I'm looking at is this height is 5 minus x. So if x were 4, that would make the height 1, which makes sense, that's possible. But if x were 5, that would make the height 0, which wouldn't make sense at all. Or if x were 6, the height would be -1, which also doesn't make sense. So x has to realistically be somewhere between 0 and 5. So it could be just above 0 or just below 5. So I'm going to make my x min 0 and my x max 5, because I know that that value of x has to fall somewhere in between there. Y then represents the actual volume. So I don't really know what that volume is going to be, but I know it can't be negative. So I'm going to start my volume at 0. And then I'm just going to leave my y max at 10, because I'm not really sure what this max volume is going to be. So I'm going to graph it and just see. So I definitely am going to have to go up some here. So there it comes back down right at 5. So I need to be able to see much higher. So now I'm going to try, let's just try 50. So I don't know what it's going to be. So now I can see that max right there. So what this point represents is the x value that would give me the largest possible volume. So I want to find that maximum. So just using the graphing calculator here to do my left bounds and right bounds to find that. Okay, so I get the point 2.113 and 48.112. So I'm going to include over here that my max, 2.113, 48.113. So you can see that this would pretty much be impossible with guessing and checking, because I don't think anybody's going to guess 2.113, and we want to find this exact here. Okay, so I now know that X is this, so my cut should be 2.113, or not my cut, I'm sorry, my length should be 2.113 feet, and that this is my maximum volume. That's the biggest we could get the volume of this aquarium to be. So we answered their first two questions, or we found the solution anyways, and what are the final dimensions of the aquarium? So for that, the final dimensions, I just have to think about the length times the width times the height. So to get that, I'm just going to follow these different factors here. So the length was just X, so I have 2.113 feet by, if I do 10 minus X, I would get 7.887 feet by, if I do 5 minus X, I would get 2.887 feet. So notice I'm including my units on there as well. Okay, so now I've found all the things that they're looking for. X, the volume, and the dimensions, and now I just have to include that in my write-up somehow. So things I want to think about when writing. So when you do this, you want to think about it more as a write-up, like things I want to make sure I talk about. So really you're going to talk about how you knew what to do. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do would be to set up my volume equation. So I definitely need to make sure I talk about that. After I set it up, I found the max. But why? Why did I want to find the max? Okay, so that's something else you would need to include in your AWP. Also, once that I found that maximum, what does the max represent? Okay, so I know the X coordinate represents that width or the length, depending on which way you look at it, of the aquarium, and I know the Y value represents that volume. So I wanted the largest volume, so I needed to find the maximum of the function where the Y was the highest. Okay, also remember when we're doing AWPs, we have those claim, evidence, and reasoning pieces. So the claim, remember, is your answer. So we really have 3 claims here because we had 3 questions. So the claim was the actual volume. The claim was the X value. They asked for that, so that's the width or length, depending on what you call it there. And then my last claim would be the dimensions. So I want to make sure I include all those things as well. Okay, because those were all things they asked for. My evidence then. So remember, evidence are your supporting pieces there. So my evidence was my volume equation. Okay, so I would want to talk about that. My other piece of evidence is my max. So the evidence should support your claim. So my volume equation gave me the volume and the X value along with the max, which also gave me the dimensions. Okay, reasoning then is the toughest. So the reasoning is kind of the why here. So why did you set up the volume? Why did you find the max? Okay, so these don't necessarily have to have complicated or long answers to them. So I set up the volume because I wanted to be able to find the maximum volume in terms of X, so I needed something to represent that. Why did I find the maximum? Because the highest volume would be at the maximum of the function. Okay, so what I want you to do is look back at your outline and make sure you included all of these things here. Okay, so if not, go ahead and add them in. If you have time, it wouldn't even be a bad idea to practice a write-up here.